Hello, good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our 2022 Automotive Solutions webinar series on the topic of CO2 compliance and sustainability. Today, we're going to have two presentations. One is presented by myself, and the other is presented by the CEO of MIH, Mobility and Harmony Consortium, Mr. Jack Chen. Mr. Jack Chen is a pioneer in the automotive industry for 40 years. He was the executive members in the traditional OEMs like Ford and Fiat Chrysler, as well as a co-founder of the leading Chinese new energy vehicle company, NIO. My name is Shi Wan. I am a principal research analyst in the S&P Global Mobility Powertrain and Compliance Forecasting team. So welcome again, and let's start with a short introduction video and some housekeeping stuffs.
There are over 1.5 billion vehicles on the road today that all have something in common: the essential intelligence of S&P Global Mobility. We provide invaluable information across the entire value chain, enabling vehicle manufacturers, suppliers, dealers, and consumers to make decisions with conviction. Our proprietary data is used to set pricing, plan future production, determine demand, and accurately predict make and model preferences. We give consumers powerful and intuitive tools to help them buy vehicles, understand what they're worth, schedule service, and decide when to sell. And as the industry undergoes its most profound shift since mass production, our data and expertise provide forward-looking insights to improve sustainability and advance innovations such as electrification, autonomous driving, and digital retail. The next chapter in automotive history is being written. Pioneering decisions are being made using the essential intelligence of S&P Global Mobility.
Sorry, I was on mute. Welcome back. So just some housekeeping reminders in case you're new or have not been using the platform for a while. Today's presentation will be given in English, but there will be several languages available for live captioning. If you would like to turn on the caption, there will be this box in the middle bottom part of your platform, of your screen. So you can select from the different languages, including Chinese, Korean, Japanese, and some others. So during the presentation, at any time, you can submit your comments, questions regarding the presentations and the topic on these Q&A boxes. And you can also rate the experiences of this webinar using the feedback box. Underneath, you can see the resource list, which has the downloadable PDF files for today's presentation, as well as introduction for the whole webinar series that you might be interested in the future, including the topics, dates, and presenters. As introduced in the video, the legacy IHS Markit Automotive has now been a part of S&P Global. We are at S&P Global continuing to support your decisions and strategy plannings with our data offerings, as well as the consulting advisory services as Euro. S&P Global is now having 6 major divisions focusing on different markets topics, and we are now named ourselves S&P Global Mobility. In the S&P Global Mobility team, we will be providing the supply demand forecast data, consulting advisory services, as well as the car registration data, and all the upcoming topics within this fast-changing world and the fast-changing industry. So let's move on to today's topic. Again, my name is Shiwan. I serve in the U.S. office, focusing on the light vehicle fuel and CO2 regulations globally, including the EU, mainland China, and U.S. market. I also take care of the carbon accountings for the corporate scope emissions as well as light vehicle life cycle CO2. Just a big picture of the background of today's topic. Now that the global markets, all the major economy entities have the mutual agreement of a net zero future, US, EU targeting a mid-century carbon neutrality, and developing countries like China and India are also committing to a later time following the similar trajectory. If we take the transport sector along, assuming that the sector will follow all the net zero projections as well as all the interim targets that have been set for the general economy or the sector specific targets, we can see that those little triangles will be the positions that the transport sector needs to stand in the upcoming 30 years also. It is a pretty challenging task to decarbonize the road transport sector. It depends on a lot of factors. It depends on what are the vehicles that are already existing on the road, how quickly the EV in the new vehicle sales can be rolled out and replace those conventional ICE vehicles, and what are the patterns, how many miles per year traveled each passenger does in each different market, and how about the mobility modes? What are the changes in the capacity of each vehicle? What are the changes in the services of public or ride sharing services? That taken that all into account, we have done a rough estimate for the road transport sector alone. And we can see that the positive side is that the decarbonization has already happening or will be happening pretty soon, like in the mainland China market. The challenging part is that with the large amount of traditional internal combustion engines on the road, how quickly we can roll out the new electric vehicle technologies on road and accelerate the process to achieve, to make those the last 10 years as smooth as possible. During the past 5 to 10 years, regulatory requirements has been one of the major drivers in the automotive industry to accelerate technology innovation to help or incentivize the electric vehicle deployment. This chart has shown us a global trending of the light vehicle CO2 emission equivalent targets in the major market. Although that we are aware the different markets are probably are regulating different metrics in different units, using different carbon contents conversions or based on different vehicle cycles. But in general, we can see that the pace is pretty much in alignment from 2015 in the past 10 years. The US market was slightly diverging from the mainstream in the past 10 years with the safe vehicle rule. But we entered the current administration, the US market has now finalized the new light vehicle GHG target as well as CAFE target up through the model year 2026, trying to bring the market back to the global mainstream and catching up, both in terms of both the stringency as well as the industry competitiveness as compared to EU and mainland China, who are leading the industry standards in the current state. EU market is still the leader in terms of setting the long-term goal. Now that the European Commission has proposed to further reduce the car CO2 emissions by 55% as compared to the 2021 level by the year of 2030. So that means for the new car fleet in 2030, we are expecting to see approximately 55 gram per kilometer in the EU market. And then along with the proposal is also the statement to achieve a 100% EV market by the year of 2035. So the industry is acting proactively, especially in the past 2 years. Every several weeks, even several days, we see announcement, we see the commitments, we see the new strategy planning from the major brands, major OEMs, and even major OES to help develop and deploy those the electric vehicles or electrified vehicles in the next 5-10 years. After that period of time, in the next 10 years, the commitment has been extended to the value chain perspective in terms of realizing a sustainable net zero future by the year of 2040, 2050 timeframe. So here's the poll question for you as the participants today. What do you think will be the most critical phase in terms of decarbonize the automotive industry and finally achieve the net zero commitment? There are several. There's no right or wrong answer, just purely your opinion. There are several phases that we need to address, like the rollout of electric vehicles, like the energy transition in those electricity supplies, also like the materials and components production phase of the vehicles. This is just your opinion on what will be the most critical phase to realize the net zero by the mid of this century. Okay, great. Looks like this is actually pretty similar to what we see as the results offline with always the offline participants that I believe many of you as the practitioner in the automotive industry has already seen the accelerated rate of EV deployment. So pretty confident with that and are ready to move to the energy sector and the upstream value chain to further decarbonize the whole life cycle of a vehicle, or we say the value chain of the companies. So let's look at some of our analysis in those phases. Let's start with the fleet electrification first, because all the regulations currently in the global markets are regulating the vehicle operational phase. That means the direct energy use of a vehicle or the tailpipe CO2. None of the markets has been regulate the upstream CO2 for a vehicle life cycle. So the electrification has been an obvious and straightforward answer. Of course, this acceleration of EV deployment has been helping the markets to meet compliance target. This is on the left-hand side is our latest 2022 H1 data. So if you're one of our SBPT or VPEC consumers, you should be seeing this in the past 2 weeks. We can see that by the year of 2034, we do expect the EU, mainland China, and US market combined to reach 60% of the electric vehicles in the new car fleet, with a slightly lower than 10% of hybrid plug-ins. And that will significantly bring down the fleet average CO2. We can see in less than 20 years time frame, the fleet average CO2 of new cars has been reduced by about 75% from nearly 180 gram per kilometer to almost 40 gram per kilometer by the year of 2034. Of course, the fleet average CO2, the tailpipe CO2 reduction is basically attributed to fewer fuel consumption with those new car fleet. We can see that the trends are showing similar conversion rate among all the three major markets, but there are slightly different paces. For example, US, we did start a little slower as compared to the other markets to involve EVs in the new car sales, but we can see the decreasing trend is there. China market is catching up quickly with the leader of EU market. So we do want to mention that you might see the US bar are a little higher here. One of the reasons is that the US market has a tradition to use relatively larger and higher performance cars in the history, and it has a lower electrification rate in the past years as compared to the two markets. Also, another reason to be considered here is a test cycle. So it's the relative pace that matters here, not the absolute value, because US does use the different test cycles as compared to the other two. So electrification does help reduce the fleet CO2. How does that make the market to comply with the regulatory standards? Here are some forecast comparisons for the three major markets. This is also the 2022 H1 data that was just released 2 weeks ago. We can see that based on the forecast, the roadmap of each single vehicles, we do estimated the upcoming targets to be the red lines here, and the performance of each target as on average as these black lines here. So one major takeaway here, I think, is that although we are seeing tightened standards in each market, especially in the EU market, and also the change in the US. But in general, the market is going to be compliant on average. Of course, this does not mean every OEM will be standing in the over-compliance position, but overall, the markets will be complying with the standards requirement. One interesting thing here is that although the markets are regulating in different stringencies, is the performance are not aligned across each markets, meaning that the OEMs will have a lower CO2 intensive fleet as compared to the other two markets. So the market performance now are not aligned with each other. Instead, they are specifically aligned with the regulated targets in each specific market. Taking a closer look at the OEM level by the end of the current regulatory time frame, which is model year 2026 for US, calendar year 2030 for EU, and 2025 for mainland China, we can see that things are slightly different in this market. US and EU are pretty similar. We do not only see a generally compliant market on average. We do see the major number of the OEMs, especially the top volumes, will be complying with the target. Only several needs help or needs to manage other credits provisions to be able to comply. Mainland China market is slightly different. Although there will be a compliant market, the OEM performances, all the compliance parents' performances are slightly different. They are pretty much evenly distributed across the target line. So we do see a large amount of a large amount numbers of the OEMs that will be needing either credits or technology innovations to comply with the market regulation. Now that we have talked about the tailpipe, the compliance, what about the upstream? What about the well to tank? Those emissions from using either fuel or electricity, because we know that electrification can zero the tailpipe, but it does not, at least for now, zero the upstream. So it's moving towards the electrification era. It's basically a transition in both energy demand and CO2 emissions. On the left-hand side, we can see that for the three markets combined, there is about 50% reduction of the new car average fuel consumption life cycle-wise from 2021 to 2034. But there is almost a 20-fold growth in the electricity demand. Where do we have enough electricity to supply those electric vehicles? Are the electricity supplies aligned with those the distribution of those EV markets, and how the electricity is going to be produced will largely determine the decarbonization effects of our electrification efforts. On the right-hand side is an example of mainland China markets, new vehicles, tailpipe and well-to-tank CO2. Of course, for the tailpipe-wise, we can see about 50 or 60% reduction within the next 13, 14 years. But in terms of well-to-tank, when moving from the traditional conventional fuels to electricity, with the larger demand of the electricity supplies, we do see a nearly 50% increase in the well-to-tank CO2 emissions for those new vehicles. Of course, this has been taken into account of the decarbonization in the electricity supply. So we can see it does show a slower, a lower slope, a smaller slope as compared to the left chart, but the increasing trend is, at least for a short period of time, existing there. To take a life cycle perspective of a vehicle emission, we know that, at least for now, electric vehicle is now zero emission, it's not carbon free. On the left-hand side is a typical mileage-based life cycle vehicle CO2 emissions, showing the case of 2020 EU passenger vehicles on average. We can see that from the mileage of zero, which implies the production or the embedded carbon in the vehicle alone, the BEVs, the battery electric vehicles, has a much higher carbon intensity as compared to the ICEs and PHEVs. From moving from ICE to a BEV, it on average implies about 60 increase of those production, the carbon embedded in the production phase, which includes the materials and components. However, we do understand that the electrification is going to reduce the vehicle operational phase CO2 emissions significantly. The main point of electrification is to bring down the slope of this black line to the red line in the operational phase. EU is actually showing a pretty good example here, but ideally we're not hoping to see a reduced slope. We are hoping to see a zero slope for the BEVs in the vehicle operational phase. EU is showing the good example of decarbonization in both the vehicle side as well as the electricity supply side. However, this decarbonization progress is not evenly distributed in every country. We do see that if a country has a larger proportion of coal to be used for electricity generation, then the decarbonization effect of moving from ICE to a BEV is pretty small. But with the higher renewable energy already implemented in the energy sector, we do see a much larger margin decarbonization effect. So in overall, with an estimate based on 2021 forecast data, the life cycle emissions reduction from a general 2020 ICE to a 2020 battery electric vehicle is about 60% for the Europe market, lower in the US about 40%, and even lower for the mainland China market about 30%, considering the relatively higher energy intensive process in material production as well as electricity production. Now that we talk about electrification, we talk about the well to tank. That means in the future, we're going to see a 100% EV world that has zero emissions for the tailpipe. And with the energy transition in the energy sector, we're going to see significant reduced carbon in the well to tank side. So how about production? How about the materials, the minerals that's going to be used in the battery productions and the battery electric vehicle productions? Let's take a step back on the vehicle product alone. If any of us ask one of the consumers or potential consumers for a battery electric vehicle in the current market, what's the most concern? It will be the range anxiety. So the market will move along to satisfy, reduce those concerns. We do see that in the upcoming 10 years, 13 years, the range as well as battery capacity on average is going to be significantly increased for the new car fleet. It comes with a trade-off in terms of the decarbonization effort, because we do see on the right-hand side, as the range moves up, as the energy capacity moves up, it does mean a higher the carbon intensity in the future vehicles as compared for now. Materials and production decarbonization will become one of the key factors in the future. If we take a look at the fleets, again, this is an example of EU markets. The 2020 average fleets, which still includes a lot of ICEs for now, only about slightly lower than 20% of CO2, life cycle CO2 emissions is from the vehicle production. However, if we look at the battery electric vehicle alone, this number will go up to nearly 60%. And if we move forward from the current year to a future year with higher energy capacity and range, then this number will further going up, could be up to 80% in the future. So that's, I usually like to call it the last mile of our decarbonization efforts in the future, because it does not mean it happened the last. It's happening now with all the suppliers and the material suppliers being the innovative players in the markets. But these once we have tamed the tailpipe and then the energy sector, then this material and production side will be one of the key factors to decarbonize the automotive industry and really finally realize the net zero target. So for the industry, same with other industries and corporates. Now in the sustainability words, there are requirements, initiatives, that ratings, as we do in our company, ask the companies to report, to quantify the scope 1 to 3 CO2 emissions. I believe many of you have been heard or even have your hand on these practices. In your opinion, what will be the most useful outside sources to support your CO2 accountings? In other words, what do you find the most difficult to tame when you report and quantify your scope emissions? Is that the data availability upstream and downstream hard to cooperate, hard to get, or is that the complicated methodology and process that requires new expertise, or is that a general industry data sets which is currently not sufficient and even not available, or is that I really want to outsource this practice? I do hope that there is a one-stop service that can help me do this. Or in some cases, are we already confident that we have handled it really well and do not need any help at all? Okay, let's review the results. Again, it's one thing that is aligned with our offline responses is the item number E. I believe this is pretty common in the industry that nearly no one has now have the 100% confidence to say that we have handled it well. Data, yes, like the other sources are evenly distributed. This is also aligned with our offline responses, especially the data set number A and C. So as a data company and as a data insights provider, let's see in the future how we can help you to tame this. So last but not least, that's coming back to the regulation side. EU is a good example of setting the integrated system for decarbonization or for any kind of transitions that's long-term and have great impacts on society. So for road transport, it will no longer be only the tailpipe requirement. It will be the life cycle accounting taken into place. It will be the battery carbon footprint being labeled and the recycling and recycled contents being required. It will be the integrated system with the financial leverages of taxonomy, the carbon trading system, and the green bond standards. So basically, we're moving from just a technical question into an integrated system. Like I said, in this integrated system, a lot of efforts needs to be coordinated across each other. We, as the data provider, will look forward to providing you the integrated data system to support your decisions and planning. And talking about the integration, we will now have the CEO of MIH, Mr. Jack Chen, to share his experiences and insights on how MIH is providing a platform to integrate the efforts from the industry. Jack?
Thank you, Wang Xi. Hi, everyone. This is Jack Chen. I'm the CEO of MIH Consortium. If you may have my connection before, I was in the car industry for a very long time, and this chance, I'd like to introduce you the CO2 and compliance and sustainability for the global automotive market. With this, we are actually moving pretty fast with the consortium. So today, I will run through you the whole consortium status, and then we'll leave some more time for Q&A and discussion. This first picture actually illustrates the last 18 months when we started with a FastCons initiative, the open platform for the industry. MIH stands for Mobility in Harmony. So if you look at the left-hand side pictures, it was the kickoff day in 18 months ago, and we have our first March partner gathering in 2021. We did reveal our products that's the go-to-market in a scenario. With the support of Foxconn, we'll be able to build an ecosystem for the industry as a partnership to manage the development of the next generation EV with also the software and the hardware. The software defining the hardware and then make sure the user experience will be superior. This picture to the right actually some connection with China and also with outside China that we are doing the business to move forwards. So if you look at also from the mobility and harmony point of view, we see the new EV trend with a lot of new startup branding coming up with in China, the NIO, Lixiang, Xiaopeng, and with also in the US side, we have Rivian, we have Aptera, we have Fisker, Lordstown, Nikola. I can't name all of them, but as you can see, US government also incentivize the newcomer to make sure that the new ecosystem for the EV. In the rest of the world, I think we also see a new startup, but in a nutshell, I think is the future volume that counts. The BEV plus PHEV sales and the percentage of growth, if you look at all this chart, in Europe, it's growing 66% from 2020 to 2021. But China was the most growth, 155% within the 1 year. And then for North America, the 96%, even though it's a huge growth, but absolute volume is lagging behind Europe and China. So I think there is a chance that US is trying to catch up with the new administration, with also infrastructure and also the policies being available. So the total market, if you count the volume, is a little bit less than 7 million EV in 2021. And we're seeing a huge growth this year as well, even though the pandemic hit and the war. But because of all this is really counting a small amount of a percentage in terms of the global volume. The global volume was still in the primitive area, and we will see in 2025 to 2030, which is the eruption of all the growth. Having said that, I think everybody believed, if you ask 5 years ago, the EV, people are a little bit skeptical about not only the infrastructure, but also on the mileage and also the safety and security of it. But I think today, people have no question, all the OEM are moving forwards. So you can see EV is really the trend. What's this open platform of MIH? I'm trying to put this in a simple chart. To the left is the software. To the right is the hardware. For hardware, people are saying, oh, we're building another EV. To my understanding, we're not building another EV. We're building computer on wheels. So we have to centralize the computing, and also we'll provide a zoner system to be able to integrate the whole algorithm and the architecture to make sure that this centralized brand to think and also trying to manage your whole body. And with the cloud and also the 5G, 6G availability, plus the security system now we're developing, we'll be able to also provide the developer to the left, which is a software player, a very good architecture with the EV service layer and also the real-time operation system, microkernel. That is SoC agnostic. So you can put on the EV kits with the mission critical part, for instance, the safety, the steering, the brake, And for the non-mission critical, which is the end of infotainment, the GPS, and so on. And then we can attract so many developers based on this architecture and develop the new apps and the API. So this is the very broad brush open EV platform. So far we have attract about 2,300 members and 25% of software, 75% of hardware. So we manage that with the whole system. So this is a very quick introduction of MIH Consortium. The progress so far so good, and we are helping with the go-to-market. And the hit the points on the carbon neutrality and also the strategy is that we are advocate the EV adoption and optimize the green supply chain for all our partners and promote the green lifestyle. So with this, I think, as you know, the roadmap in the future, the carbon footprint of the ICE versus the new EV, counting based on the current EV market, and also with taking an example of a Model C, which is to be launched quickly, that the carbon CO2 reduction, we're aiming for a 60% in terms of production and the battery and the usage. And if you look at in the longer term, by 2030, we really want to make a huge reduction and cut it to from 35 tons per current internal combustion engine to 15 tons, almost more than half. So that's the green strategy moving forwards. And also, if you're counting all the players, OEM, they're launching models with the EV and also the green energy. We're also looking at all their mix is going to all the segmentation. So I believe that this is going to stir up the whole market and then look at the new CO2 reduction process. And the next slide will give you a roadmap on how we manage the roadmap. We do have, we do have a carbon footprint in the EV cycle, life cycle, from raw material for our membership. We use the decentralized DID to enable the carbon index tracking. So with the technology of the blockchain, we'll be able to track everything from the whole 9 yards, you know, from the scratch of the raw material to the manufacturing process, production, to the logistic, and to the end, the user end. And then we promote the green lifestyle. This is becoming more and more important for our next generation. So I think that there's a process that we are managing this well. This is also an EV supply chain playbook and certification. So from defining the project theme for our partner, then we disclose the baseline and develop the carbon footprint management plan. And eventually we have commitment with the help from the third party and implement the greenhouse gas reduction, plus on the carbon offset plan and the achievement in the validation by the third party. So there is a process and roadmap to manage all this. And to the right, the chart is actually our working group, which is working diligently on the solution. For instance, the security and the OTA as one group, the energy storage as one group, thermal system as one group, the ADAS as one group. So the partner now actively participating on this with the membership. And then also we're providing them with a go-to-market opportunity. So really promote the next generation EV. If you may ask why we're doing this against the closed loop, I think the open loop, as you see the Android versus iOS, we believe there's an opportunity to augment the development of a current OEM with an open platform and manage that and push for our next generation EV ecosystem. And I think the green and the CO2 reduction becoming one of the key topic we are trying to tackle. And with that, I think I wrap up my presentation and leave a lot of discussion opportunity for the audience. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Jack, for sharing the insights from the MIH perspective and your experiences. So now let's move on to the Q&A sessions. So we do have several questions coming in, and I will start with Jack. Probably there's one question for you about the combination of infrastructure and the regulation. So the question is, the infrastructure, like the charging points, has been a key factor in rolling out the electric vehicles. So what do you see as the possibly most significant factors in regulation to help accelerate this progress? For example, which areas of the investment funds can be, or which specific technology standards should help with the charging process, or maybe consumer incentives, etc.
Yeah. Thank you, Wang Xi. I think as you know, when I did my first startup in China, we do get a lot of help from the government. And as you see now, the desired outcome actually is there are more charging slots and infrastructure available in China. For everything outside of China, people are trying to catch up too. So first thing, the government support, the regulation, infrastructure, meaning that all the parking lots and all the new construction will have to stipulate the charging facility, the availability to the new energy vehicle. And the second thing is really from the industry, there are a new ecosystem available for the funding to come in, particular because charging is not just a charging industry, it's a data sharing, and with the AI and also the software capable kind of capability that will provide the startup to really pound on the infrastructure, the data sharing, data calculating, and also to manage not only the current technology, but also the user side. So really there are user requirements to drive this day by day. My calculation is in the next 2 to 3 years, there will be a big eruption because of the product availability that needs the infrastructure to be in place. And there will be a lot of company, a lot of capital money to come in and help the growth of that. And the last but not the least is really there are competition efforts in between the startup and also the traditional guy. So in the startup, they are more software driven, data sharing. But for the traditional, there will be more infrastructure hardware. So the competition is always there, software and hardware, and a combination of both. And I see this is going to be a very, very hot and popular market to go into.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Jack. Another question, since you mentioned the fundings. So at MIH and also your 40-year experiences, what have been the top maybe 1 to 3 areas that MIH or other system platforms like MIH seeing help to allocate the funds to support EV development in terms of, like you said, in terms of either the technology or the ecosystem as a whole?
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that. We just had a good discussion this morning within our group about uh, helping the startup to get the fund. And then really there are a lot of opportunity for now to restructure and make sure the new unicorn are coming in a scale that you would never see before. Uh, Normally in the pre-pandemic period, you will see there are people with a comfort zone working a big company and manage their life. I think after 2, 3 years, people work from home and they are feeling sometimes there's a stress of working alone and working remotely. And there will be more entrepreneur thinking. People work as an individual to build their startup with 2, 3 people. They may just go out and do their own things. So we are actually, as a platform, MIH Consortium, we are becoming like an incubator and help them to find the appropriate loan or fund for that. But that's one side. The other side is on the technology side, we're helping them to talk to different people but have the common vision. So in the working group, actually, people were seeing each other before as a competitor, now becoming a partner. And then they foster the relationship and manage as an open platform, and then with a healthy competition and manage for a new development. So I think this is becoming a new phenomena post-pandemic, and people are more friendly because they want to be surviving in the environment that they can talk to people as a smaller group and manage forward. So this is a really interesting question. I have no definite answer, but seeing all this syndrome and also the pandemic, I see this as a risk and becoming an opportunity.
Thanks, Jack. Again, thank you for sharing your profound experiences. So I will move on to some of the questions regarding the CO2 emissions and regulations. I do see one of the questions about the regulatory compliance, what the credits will play in terms of helping OEM comply, and how about are we going to see a viable markets for the credit trading in those major markets? So things are different. First of all, I would say credits have been play a significant part in the regulation, and that's actually the intent, because that's the credit system were supposed to help with a smooth transition to incentivize the later entries, and also to reward the early players in the EV market. In terms of the credit trading activities in the U.S. market, it has been pretty active. We do see several active players like the FCA, Tesla, in the historical years. Also, similarly in the EU market, although there is no direct market the compliance credits available, but there is those the what's called the pooling strategies that OEMs can choose to pool as one single compliance parent in a specific year, even without any business affiliations. So that's also an activity of how to managing the over compliance and the under compliance performances across the industry. But in the future years, we do see the mainland China will become slightly more viable markets as compared to the other two in the relatively longer term, up to 2025, 2026, 2025 timeframe. By the end of 2025, the EU market and US market will be like shown in the previous slides, will be much more compliant as for the most top players. So on the other side, mainland China will become a viable market at that time. And we do see that the CUF-C deficit is currently more driving than the NAV credits at the current moment to incentivize those trading activities in the mainland China markets. So we will continue to track what will be the updates in terms of the regulation of the dual credit system and have an updated forecast on that. And also that to be said, we did have a white paper published on our website talking about the credit trading forecast and activities free for downloading from the web. There is another question on the okay, there are actually several questions on the life cycle CO2. One is related to whether the slides has taken into account of the fuel cycle in terms of energy production CO2. And the other question is about what will be the biggest driver for the automotive suppliers to reduce CO2 in their offerings and any guidelines on the timeline. So let me first answer give a quick question on the first question. So answer on the first question. So the answer is yes, we have been taking into account of the CO2 emissions from the energy production side to quantify the life cycle. And regarding the second question, I think that's one of the key inquiries that we have been seeing from our supplier clients. The question is now that there are a lot of pressures or incentives from the demand side, from the customer, from the financial institutions, from the OEM to require the Scope 3 emissions to be reported as a part of the sustainability report. So that means the suppliers has the obligation to some extent to take into account of materials and the components as well as the downstream use of their products, what the carbon emissions will be there. For example, for the battery companies in the roadmap of regulation in Europe market that we show, there will be the carbon footprint requirements upcoming in 2024 timeframe and a mandatory labeling by the year of 2027, and also there's the recycling and the recycled contents requirements by the similar timeframe. In regarding of life cycle based carbon emissions, the European Commission is evaluating the methodology, the possible of integration of life cycle based standards, and the review is supposed to be out by the year of 2023. And so far as I know that in mainland China market, there is also the organization that supports the MIT regulation making, that they are doing the research. Actually, I think that the draft is actually done at this time frame. It's not being regulated yet, but it has been proposed to the MIT in regard of accounting the life cycle CO2 emissions for the car manufacturers' new car fleet. So that means if the new car fleet is required to be evaluated based on the life cycle, then the suppliers will have the obligations, will have the pressures to provide or at least or decarbonize its own process and production in this to this concern. So I think due to the time limit of this webinar, we have 1 minute left. That's first thank Jack again for joining us in today's discussion. Thanks, Jack. And finally, that's there's a little broadcast for the upcoming webinar on June the 9th. Within 4 weeks, we will be having Mark from our advisory service team talking about the new technology landscapes. Mark is the associate director of the advisory team, focusing on the all researching on all the innovative technologies, including UX, autonomy driving, ADAS, etc. So we'll be looking forward to seeing you there on June the 9th. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Wang Xi. See you guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Have a great weekend.